We're taking a look at Metallica's classic Battery today, so let's get tuned up. We're in standard tuning. And the first thing we hear is this. Okay, so start with an E power chord essentially, but this is what works for me, the fingering that works for me, the middle two fingers. And I slide my ring finger up to the 3rd fret of the D string to start with. So we have the low open E, 2nd fret of A, and the 3rd fret of D. So strum through that and immediately bring that note that was on the 3rd fret of D back to the 2nd fret. Right, essentially forming the E power chord. And then we drop our first finger to the 1st fret of the low string and lift off, have an open A. So we have the 1st fret of the low string, open A, and the 2nd fret of D. Okay, so far we have this. And then just moving that note that was on the 1st fret up to the 2nd fret on the low string. So now we have the 2nd fret of the low string, open A, and the 2nd fret of D. Now we want an open D as we shift to a 3-string power chord off of the 3rd fret of the low string, so a G power chord. So we have the 3rd fret of the low string and 5 and 5 on A and D. Okay, and that's the first half of the riff. I view it as a 4-measure riff, and that's the first half. So nice and slow, the first half of that. Okay, and the second half is the exact same except for the last chord. Okay, that very last chord, we're going to a 2-string G power chord. So we just have the 3rd fret on the low string and the 5th fret on the A string with an open D ringing above that. So we have the same pitch, that D pitch, right? That is the same on the 5th fret of the A string and the open D. So there's the full riff. Let's just put that together nice and slow. Okay, and that repeats for the duration of the acoustic portion. That just repeats a few times, exactly the same each and every time. Okay, now before we get into the distorted part, where the rhythm part changes a bit, we hear some harmonized guitars, and there's 3 lead lines that layer up on top of each other. The first one sounds like this. Okay, so let's talk about that. We've got the 4th fret on the G string. Okay, and we want to glide into that again. And because there's a couple of muted strings there, you hear this, right? You kind of hear those dead strings before you hear that note on the 4th fret. So I just lay my other fingers of my fretting hand over top of the A and the D strings. So I pick through the A and the D and arrive at that G string, right? So you hear that, those couple of dead strings before that note. Now we come up to the 4th or the 5th fret of the G, down to 7 on D, okay? Now just repeat those 3 notes, right? Slightly different rhythm there. And then we do it again with the rake into that first note, down to the 5th fret of D, and then back up to 5 and 4 on G. Okay, so we've got this. That repeats again, and it's exactly the same, except we have a little hammer pull from the 4th to the 5th, which you'll see here in a second. So we start the same, and then we have that little hammer pull there. Okay, the rest of it's the exact same. Okay, so nice and slow through that part, goes like this. Now the second harmony guitar comes in, sounds like this. Okay, so we're going to start on the 7th fret of G and rake into that with those dead strings the same way we raked into that 4th fret on G, up to the 9th fret of G, down to the 10th of D. Okay, now we're going to repeat those notes, but with that little hammer pull. Right, so 7, then hammer pull from 7 to 9, down to 10 on D again. Okay, so far we have this. Repeat those notes with that rake again. Down to 9 on D, then up to 9 and 7 on G. Right, and there's that second harmony guitar part. The third harmony part goes like this. Okay, again, same techniques here. We're gonna rake into that 12th fret on G, just to get the dead A and the D strings in there, up to the 14th fret of G, down to the 14th fret of D. So you just wanna think ahead slightly there. Play that 14th fret on G with the flat of your finger so that you can roll up nice and smooth onto the tip of your finger onto the D string. Right, now repeat those notes. Rake into that 12th fret and repeat the notes again. Down to 12 on D, 14 and 12 on G, okay? And then we can play that again and do the little trill between 12 and 14 on the G string. Right, and there's all three parts. Okay, so that with that little trill, don't let that confuse you. That's just flip-flopping, right? The first half of the progression just goes straight, no trill. The back half of the progression, that second 2 measures, has the trill. So it just alternates, you know, no trill, trill, no trill, trill. And the other thing that I want to mention is I've located all 3 harmony guitars on the G and the D strings. I've seen a lot of people play it, and a lot of tabs have it, where they're locating the second harmony on the B string, starting on the B string, and then the third starting on the E string. But to my ear, everything was on the same string set, so that's where I showed you, but you could move it wherever you want. But that takes care of the acoustic portion of the intro. Let's kick on our distortion and go over the next part of the intro. Okay, so when the distortion kicks on, we're using pretty much the same chords. There's a little trick there though that I believe they use just to keep it clean, because if you were to put a lot of distortion on, you know, those aren't the most friendly chords to be playing with a lot of distortion. So we'll get to what I think was going on there in 1 second. So we start off with an E power chord, and again, I use my middle 2 fingers to fret that E power chord, but you could just do it with 1 finger if you wanted to. And then chug on that low E string. Now this is where the little trick is, that instead of just hitting this next chord where you've got the 1st fret on the low string, open A, and 2nd fret on D, what I hear is a very quick, you know, grace note pull off from the 3rd fret of the D string to the 2nd, right? So it's really quick. Then you slide up to the 2nd fret of that low string, and again with that little pull off. Right, so there's that little pull off, 2 chugs on the 2nd fret to the 3 string G. And then again, we're gonna repeat that for the second half, exact same, except going to the 2 string power chord at the end. Right, I believe that's the way it was on the recording with that little grace note pull off. It does keep those, you know, dissonant chords a lot cleaner sounding rather than just hitting the full thing. And anyways, that's what I hear on the recording. So that just repeats for the rest of the intro too, until we get into the main fast riff. So I'll just go through that nice and slow for you one more time. Okay. Now, as far as the harmony guitars go, we've already covered it. They're exactly the same as they were in the acoustic portion, but there's just no raking into any of those notes, those muted strings before that first note. They're gone. And we're gonna palm mute the first two notes. So palm mute 4 and 5 on G. Right, so there's just a heavy palm mute on those first couple of notes, and same with the second guitar, right? Palm mute. And palm mute on that third one as well. And the other thing, there's no more little hammer pull anymore either. That's done away with. You know how we had that little... That's gone. There's no more hammer pull throughout the rest of the intro. It's just playing it straight. Okay, so that takes care of the entire intro, and it does just end with 4 power chords. And then we're into our main riff, right? So that's just an E power chord, B power chord, 2nd fret of the A string, G power chord, 3rd fret of the low string, and then a minor 3rd dyad, where we've got 6 on the A string and 4 on the D string. And then we're gonna get into our main riff. Okay, so let's cover the main riff now. And here I'll do a performance of that and we'll break it down. So the rest of the intro revolves around this main fast riff that also functions as the verse riff. We hear this. Okay, so we just covered this in the intro a second ago, but it's worth repeating just so we're on the same page. E power chord, B power chord, 2nd fret of A, G power chord, 3rd fret of the low string, minor 3rd dyad here, 6th fret of A, 4th fret of D, and then into the fast riff. Okay, so the fast riff, we're gonna slide that 6 and 4 that we were doing up a second ago, half a step up to 7 on A, 5 on D, and then do the gallop rhythm on the low E string with a palm mute, right? 1 and a 2 and a 3. Down, down, up, down, down, up, down. And then, okay, we've got a B flat power chord, 6th fret of the low string, dropping at a half a step to the 5th fret A. That's our first measure. Now repeat that gallop rhythm, 1 and a 2 and a 3. And then, okay, second measure ends with these minor 3rd dyad on 7 on A, 5 on D. Hit that twice, down to 5 on A, 4 on D. Back up to 7 on A, 5 on D. Okay, now that there, little dyad movement, the minor and the major, is where a lot of discrepancies come in between people playing it and people tabbing it. And very, very simple explanation behind that. They originally recorded it on the album with the way I just showed you, with this minor 3rd on 7 and 5, down to the major 3rd on 5 and 4, right? But once they started playing it live, they just did away with that and slid the minor 3rd half a step back and forth. So it was 7-5 down to 6 and 4, back to 7 and 5, right? So that's why there's discrepancies. They themselves are playing it differently than the way it was recorded. And as we go through this track, you're going to see that there is some nuances behind it, and it could potentially get complicated remembering where we're going to hit 4 and 5 versus 4 and 6. You know, sometimes we're going to hit this 4 and 5, sometimes we're going to hit 4 and 6. So I imagine they just said, oh, forget that. You know, we'll just hit 4 and 6 the whole time, since it's really not even a perceptible difference anyways, right? So anyways, that's the difference behind the tabs. Now you know. And so there's our first couple of measures. Let's do it nice and slow. Okay, then that third measure is the same as measure 1. Then we have this. Okay, so E palm mute to this F sharp power chord on the 2nd fret, sliding up 1/2 step to G on the 3rd fret. E palm mute, repeating that G power chord on the 3rd fret, sliding it up 1/2 step to G sharp or A flat, however you want to think of that. Okay, and there's the first half of the riff. That's 4 measures. The second half of the riff is the exact same except for the last measure. Okay, but I'll just play the first half nice and slow for you. Okay, second half of the riff. Okay, as you can see, it's the exact same except for the last measure. Okay, so sliding back up to the 6th fret, B flat, power chord, sliding down to the 5th fret, A power chord. And we hit that 4 times. The tricky thing there is at that tempo, it could be tricky to feel the upbeats, but we're hitting all of those on off beats. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then repeating the riff, okay? So that's just something to be aware of there. Keep the timing nice and tight, feeling those off beats. Okay, so there's the whole riff. I'll play it nice and slow. And then we repeat the entire riff one more time in this intro. Okay, getting into the verse just with a couple of power chords here. We jump down to an E power chord, G power chord, 3rd fret of the low string, up to an A power chord. We're going to hit it on the 5th fret of the low string, and then 2 E chugs to that minor 3rd dyad on 4 and 6. Okay, and then we can just get into that main riff again, the same way we did the first time for the verse. Okay, so there's the intro as well as the verse riff for you. Now that we went through the whole thing, I'll just play that with some scrolling tabs so that you can follow along. Okay, the next thing we have to talk about is the chorus. So here's a playthrough of that, and then we'll break it down. So as you can see, most of the chorus consists of riffs that we've already talked about. So no need to go super in depth into all of it, but let's just go through the whole thing so we're on the same page. We start with those power chords that we first saw in the intro right before going into the verse. E power chord, G, A, 2 E palm mutes with the minor third dyad, 6 and 4, and then main riff. Back to these chords, repeat them exactly the same. Now, first 2 measures of that main riff. Cannot kill the family, battery is found in me. Okay, so that line, we've got these chords underneath that line. E power chord, B, G, and then we're gonna slide the minor third. Okay, so 7 and 5, down to 6 and 4, and then back up to start the main riff. And again, we're gonna play the first 2 measures of that main riff. Okay, so and then we've got that third measure in there of that main riff. We've got a measure of 5, 4. So what we start that measure the same. And then we go to this B flat on the first fret of the A string. Okay, it's the same pitch as this other B flat that we've been hitting on the 6th fret of the low string, right? But we're gonna relocate it so that we can jump down and get an F here. So we hit that B flat twice, open A string, palm mute, get back to that B flat and palm mute it, jump down to F on the first fret of the low string and palm mute that. Okay, so 1 and then 2 and then 3 and 4 and 5 and then back into the main riff again. Okay, so just nice and slow that measure. Now back to the main riff. Okay, so we do that again one last time to end the chorus, going to that B flat on the first fret of the A string, A palm mute, that open A, back to the B flat, down to the F, and then E power chord stab. And now at the end of the first chorus, we have this little tag that goes back to the verse where the lead fill goes over, and that's these chords that we've already covered, the E, G, A, 2 E palm mutes, minor third dyad, and back into our verse, which is the main riff. Okay, so there is the chorus. It's got, the trickiest part is probably that measure of 5, 4 in there. But other than that, you know, it's pretty much elements that we've already covered. So let's just do a playthrough of that with some scrolling tabs so you can follow at a slower pace. And then we will get into that little lead fill that happens at the end of the first chorus. And now let's talk about that little lead fill that happens after chorus 1, and here's a super quick playthrough of that. This is a really cool lick, and if you've studied it before, you'll notice that my transcription is a little bit different than the other transcriptions that we have floating around out there. That's because it's not just a straight repeating idea the whole way through like most tabs have it. So let's start at the beginning, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So we're gonna start with a unison bend, okay? So 12th fret on the high string, bending the 15th fret on B up whole step at the same time, and then grabbing the 12th fret on the high string one more time. Okay, that's how it starts. Now we have this. Okay, so that's 17 to 12, pull off on the high string, then 15 to 12, 14 to 12, down to 15 on the B string, back up to 12 on the high string. Right now, most tabs, in fact, all the tabs I've ever seen, have that 2 beats repeating over and over, right, for the duration of the lick there until the end, of course. But it only plays it exactly like that one time. So you only do that the first time. Now we do it again, but stop on the 15th fret of the B string. So we lop off the 8th note, the last note of that little repeating thing. So what we really have is 7 notes spread out evenly over the course of 2 beats. Okay, so that means we're gonna end with a downstroke. Now go back up to the 17th fret with another downstroke. So we have 2 downstrokes in a row there, really in quick succession, to start that again. Now do it again, back up to that 17th fret. And then we're gonna finish off the lick, okay? So to finish this lick off, we're gonna go to the B string, 14, and then hammer pull between 12 and 14. Come down to the G string, 14, 12. 14 on D. Come back up to the 14th frets on the G and the B. You want to bar those 2 strings with your ring finger. And then you don't have to go for any specific pitches, just bend the strings, get that bluesy grind, and then come to the 12th fret on the G and the B, bar that with your index finger, and you can slide it. Okay, so the whole lick, nice and slow. Let's put that to some slowed down scrolling tabs so you can really nail the timing of that. So the next section that we have to talk about is the interlude section that happens after the second chorus. So here's a playthrough of that and we'll break it down. Now after that brief lead break, we get into a second verse and chorus. And then after the second chorus, there's an interlude. Okay, so the second chorus ends the same as the first. Now there's a very short 2-bar tag between that second chorus and the interlude. And all of that is holding an E power chord for 2 measures. Now we're into the interlude, and the first 4 measures of the interlude are okay, and all that is, again, E power chord for 2 measures, G power chord, and then, okay, so that's G power chord stab, 2 E palm mutes, then back to G. Now the next 4 measures are this. Okay, and again, that's E power chord, to the G, and then 2 quick hits on the B power chord, 2nd fret of the A string. Okay, and then we're into the rhythm underneath that section, okay? So the first 4 measures of the rhythm underneath that goes like this. Okay, so again, start on E power chord. Now, slide, you hear a slide up to the C power chord, 3rd fret of A, down half a step to B, down to G. 2 E palm mutes, back to G, A, B, back to the E, where we can repeat this, okay? So those 4 measures, again, nice and slow, are this. Now we're going to repeat a little bit. And then here. Okay, we end that second set of 4 slightly different. We start, it's the same, all this. And then here we have 2 E palm mutes, then G, and this is just a single note now, right? So down, down, up, down on that G. And then 3 hits on the open A palm mute. Then 2 hits on the B on the 2nd fret. Okay, and then we're going to start repeating for our next set of 4 measures. Okay, so that second time through the chord progression. Okay, the third time is the exact same as the first. Now the fourth time, okay, it changes a little bit. Start on that E power chord. G, C, back to G. Hold that for 2 measures, and then we've got that B flat to A, and then we're into the solo. Okay, so there is the whole rhythm guitar for the interlude. Let's just put that together nice and slow with some scrolling tabs so you can nail that, and then we'll talk about the lead that goes on in the interlude. So that's the rhythm for the entire interlude section. Let's talk about the lead. I'll give it a quick playthrough and then we'll break that down. So the lead in the interlude can be thought of as a 4-bar phrase, and our first bar goes like this. Okay, so 7th fret on the A string, palm mute to low E, up to 4 and 5 on the D string, back down to 7 on A. Okay? 2 more palm mutes on the E, and then hit that 7th fret on the A string again. There's our first measure. Okay, so that next measure, we start off by hitting 2 E palm mutes, 5 on D, 7 on A, 2 more palm mutes, and then 5, 7, 7 on A. Okay, let's put those 2 measures together. It goes like this. Okay, and from there we can repeat a little bit. Okay, and then, so at the very end, we're just going 5 on D, 7 on A, then 4, 5, 7 on D. Okay, and there's our 4 bars, and that repeats exactly the same 3 times. So nice and slow through that. Okay, and again, we're just going to repeat it another couple times. And again. Now the fourth time, right, we only play one measure of it, and we put in 3 E chugs here. So we go start off the exact same. Right, there's 3 E chugs there. 7, low E, 4, 5 on D, down to 7 on A, and then 3 chugs on that E. Now we have 7 on A, 7 on E, skip all the way up to the G string, 4, slide up to 7, okay? Okay, there you have that interlude lead, and then we kick into the solo. But before we talk about the rhythm under the solo, let's do the lead in the interlude with some scrolling tab. Okay, we made our way through the entire interlude. The next thing is the solo, and let's cover the rhythm underneath the solo. First, it's a pretty cool rhythm, so here's a playthrough of that. Okay, so going into the solo, we hear that B flat to A movement. Right, and then we're into the rhythm under the solo. So we start with the gallop rhythm. Okay, 1 and a 2 and a 3. That's down, down, up, down, down, up, down on that low E. And then we're gonna hit the 6th fret on that low string, right? And then take the palm mute off to stab that 6th fret power chord B flat, down a half step to A. Right? So we're keeping that B flat to A movement going. Repeat that E, the low open E, to the 6th fret, and then the 2 power chord stabs. Do it again. Okay, so there's the first couple of measures. Nice and slow, goes like this. Right? And now the next couple of measures goes the exact same except for the very end. Right, so at the very end we go open E to the 2nd fret F sharp, and then stab the F sharp power chord, moving down a half step to the 1st fret F. Okay, so there's the first half of the riff. It's an 8-bar riff that's going to repeat one more time, but the first 4 measures goes like this. Okay, the second half of this riff, the next 4 measures are the exact same except for the last measure. We just substitute in that B flat to A movement again, but it's the exact same as what we just did. Okay, and then we repeat the whole 8 measures all over again. Now, before we move on into the rest of the rhythm under the solo, I just wanted to make mention of one quick fact for those of you who are really studying the tune, and that's that James is playing this ever so slightly differently live than the way that he recorded it on the album. Okay, live he's doing this. Okay, so that's the way he's playing those power chords. So on the album, he initially palm muted that first 6th fret and then only 2 power chord stabs. Now he's playing it 3 power chord stabs. Instead of palm muting that 6th fret, he's just hitting the power chord. 3 stabs there. Okay, that's how he's playing it live now. Like I said, ever so slight difference, but feel free to do it like that if you want. Now we're gonna have some chords for the last third of the solo. E, hold that for a measure. These are all gonna be held for one measure. G, up to the 5th fret, A, down to that 2nd fret, F sharp, E, G. Now I hit an open A here, just a stab there. You could just hit that, go back up to the 5th fret again and hit the A there. Okay, and that takes care of the solo. So those chords again, E, G, A, F sharp, E, G, A, and then we wait almost 2 full measures into the next riff. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's slow this whole rhythm down with some scrolling tab and then tackle the solo. Here we go. Okay, we've made our way to the solo, guys. Here's a playthrough of that. So the solo starts off with some double stop bends. Okay, so bar the G and the B string at the 14th fret with your ring finger. Hit both those strings together and then bend them. And you don't need to go for any specific pitch. You just want to get that cool grinding sound. Okay, and we're gonna do that 5 times. And then come back to the unbent 14th fret on the G string, and then, okay, that's 12 to 14 on G, back to the barred 12th fret of the G and the B together. Okay, now we have this next lick. Okay, so that's, start off like this. Okay, that's 14th on G, up to 12 on B, and then 15 to 12 pull off twice on the B string. Okay, now it gets more repetitive at this point. Back to the G string, 14 to 12 on B, and pull off there from 15 to 12 again. Do that twice more, those 4 notes. And then bend the 15th fret on B to end that lick. Okay, so far the whole solo goes like this. Now our next lick. Okay, a little bit more of the same. Starts a little bit different here. We go up to the high string, 15, and we're gonna bend that more than a whole step. It's a step and a half almost, so overbend it. And then the second time, you wanna also snag the B string underneath your finger to get both of those strings to sound. Okay, and then release it slow to a 15 to 12 pull off. Okay, and then you want to repeat that 12th fret, 15 to 12 pull off, down to the B string 15, back up to the high string. Okay, so let's just put that together. Okay, now we have this. Okay, I'm just gonna go there because after that point, it gets to a repeating thing for the rest of the lick. That's just 15 to 12, pull off on the 2 high strings. Okay, and now we repeat 4 notes for the rest of this lick. We go 15 to 12, pull off again on the B string, down to the G string 14, and you can nudge that super quick, and then come back to the B string 12. And that just repeats 3 times. And then the end of the lick is another 15 to 12 pull off, 15 fret bend on the B string there, and that's the end of the lick. Okay, so let's just put that whole lick together, starting from those overbends. Okay, now we have this lick. Okay, so it's a lick that you don't need to be too concerned with any of the notes that you're hitting, except for the very start and end points. And the idea behind it is to go on it's the G string, the whole thing. And we're going 4-2-0, 4-2 open, over and over and over. Okay, to start this lick. Now, every tab that I've ever seen says that it's 6 notes a beat, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like that, but it's not that fast. It's really, just do that at a comfortable pace. It's not like insane shred speed, just, right? It's that sort of a speed. Now, what you want to do is get that going while you're feeling the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and once you can do that, we can introduce this hand. And really what this hand is doing is a triplet pattern. So you could start picking triplets, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And that's where the lick gets its exciting sound from, is because you're just picking triplets and while doing this, and it's hitting different notes every time, right? You don't have to sync your hand up specifically with any notes. You're just picking triplets while trilling with this hand. Now, another thing that you do hear on the recording is an open D string. So if we're picking triplets, we have some upstrokes in there, right? And it's very natural once you get the feel of this, just to pick the D string with one of those upstrokes every once in a while, and it can just be random. You don't have to hit any specific open D on any specific beat, right? It's a completely random feeling lick, right? I put some open Ds in there. I'll slow that down. Right? You get the idea. Now, after you've done that for about 2 measures, nearing the end of the second measure, and again, this doesn't have to be super exact, just, you know, once you've done almost 2 measures of this idea, you start climbing up the G string. Again, don't worry about any pitches. You're just climbing up with random chromatic pitches, and you're doing that for about a measure. Okay, so then now we've done 3 measures of that lick so far. The 4th and final measure, we switch to just downstrokes. Okay, and on the album, he really chops at that, right? Like you can really hear him digging into that string. But what you're doing is just switching to, right? It's just like 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, so that 4th and final measure of that lick, you just switch to some downstrokes and climb up to that 14th fret on the G string. That's the final note that you're shooting for, right? Okay, so I'll slow that lick down as best I can here and try to show you what's going on. Okay, now we have this lick. Okay, so we start off. That's the first measure. 12, 15, 14 on the high string. And then, okay, so that's 12, 14 to 12 pull off, 15 on the B string. Okay. Last 2 beats there of that first measure, 12 on the high string again, 15 on the B string, 14 to 12 pull off on that B string, and then 14 to 12, again, repeat that on the B string. Okay, so there's our first measure. Okay, now we have this. Okay, and this is all straight out of our E minor blues scale. So we start off, okay, repeat that 14 to 12 pull off on the B string again, down to 14 on G. And then, okay, continue down our scale, 12 on G, 14 on D, 12 on D, and then 14, 13, 12 on A. Okay, let's put those two measures together because this is a pretty long lick. So it goes like this so far. Okay, now we have this. Okay, and again, it's just climbing straight up and down, playing around with our E minor pentatonic scale here. 15 on the low string, 12 and 14 on A, 12 and 14 on D, and then 12 on the G string, 12 on D, 14 on A, and then back to the D string, 12, 14, 12, 14. Okay, and that's the whole lick. That measure, I'll just play once by itself again before we put it all together. Okay, let's put that whole lick together nice and slow. Okay, now we have this. Okay, so we start off, slide into 9 on D, 7 on G and B, bend 10 up a whole step on the B string, then 10, 8 on B, down to 7, down to 9 on the G string, back up to 7 on B, and 8. Now, quick little pull off between 8 and 7 there. Down to 9 on the G string. Okay, so far. Now 7 to 6 on the G string. Okay, then we get into these quarter note triplets. Okay, so that's 7 on G, slide up to 9, back to 7, then down to 6, come down to 9 on D, back up to 7 and 6 on G, and then down to 7 and 6 on D. Slide into 9 on D. Okay, so that whole lick nice and slow. Okay, almost there. In the next lick. Okay, so kind of repeat this idea that we just had down here a second ago. Slide into 14 on D, 12 on G and B, and then bend 15 on B. Okay, and then that's 15 to 12 pull off on B, down to the 14th fret on G. Back up to 12 on B, bend the 15th fret on the high string, and then 2 pull offs between 15 and 12 on the high string. Okay, now we end this solo. Cool little lick here. So we start off. Okay, so that's 12, 13 on the B string, up to 15 on the high string. Come back to the B string, 13, 12, down to 10, back to 12, and then up to the 14th fret on the high string. And then to finish this lick off, it goes. Okay, and that is 12, 10 on the B string, slide down to 8, then 10, 8 pull off, slide down to 7, and then 8, 7 pull off. Now what you hear is so it's an open G with just a random slide on the bottom couple of strings. And that will feel natural once you get it up to speed too. It's just, you know, your picking hand just kind of does that naturally. So that lick nice and slow. And there's the whole solo, guys. Let's put it together with some scrolling tab. Okay, we're on to our very last riff that we have to learn, guys. This is the short 2-bar riff that happens right after the solo. I'll give it a quick performance, then we'll break it down. Okay, so this riff starts with an F sharp to F power chord movement on the low string, so 2nd fret to 1st fret. Now palm mute, a low open E. Now we're going to come up to the A string, B flat on the 1st fret. We're going to alternate that power chord with B on the 2nd fret. We're going to go B flat to B, and we're going to do that 3 times. Okay, but we want to put a low palm muted E in between each one of those stabs. So B flat, B, B flat, B, B flat, B, one more E palm mute before we repeat that starting on the F sharp there, 2nd fret of the low string. Okay, so the riff actually repeats on beat 4. That's its start point, right? 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Okay, and we play that 4 times, and then we just end on the F power chord stab, right? The 4th and final time. And then we get into another verse and until the outro. So before we get to the outro, which is really just more of the same, a couple of things I want to talk about though very briefly. I'll just play this riff nice and slow for you so you can follow along with some scrolling tab. Okay, so we've made it to the outro, guys. I'll give that a quick playthrough and then just talk about a couple of minor details in there. As you can see, the outro is that same riff that we just covered. A couple of minor details though. It plays 8 times in the outro, but the first time it doesn't start on beat 4, it starts right on beat 1 with the F. Before it starts repeating as it did before. So just come right in on beat 1 on the F, 1st fret, and then jump up to the B flat. So there's no E palm mute between that either. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it repeats as we learned it before for another 6 times. And then what would be the 8th repetition of it, we only play 1 bar. So we go on the 8th time, just end on that B on the 2nd fret, hold it for 2 measures, and then come down to the F sharp to F, 2nd fret to 1st fret power chord movement, ending on an E power chord stab. That's the track. Okay, so here's the outro slowed down, and then we've got it. So there's the track, guys. I hope you had a lot of fun learning this along with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you see more of this content. I've got lots more on the way, and I'll see you soon.